Millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people.
You cannot shake hands with a clenched fist.
Produced by a nuclear exchange would be carried by wind and water and soil and seed to the far corners of the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
We're not saying that planet Earth is coming to an end. We're saying that planet Earth is about to be refurbished, spaded under, and have another chance to serve as a garden for another civilization.
Most of the people in here are just your reflections. They're your mistakes.
1776 will commence again if you try to take our firearms.
1 million of the planet's 8 million species are threatened.
You are what you repeatedly do. Therefore, excellence ought to be a habit, not an act.
Your lives and the credibility of the United Nations is at stake.
Epstein didn't kill himself.
The reason this is such an interesting time is not only because we're on the threshold of the end of this civilization.
They're trying to take you out with bullshit.
The experience of the past 2 years has proven beyond doubt that no nation can appease the Nazis.
To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish.
In the language of the U.S. Department of Defense, these are unidentified aerial phenomena.
Roswell's a very interesting place with a lot of people that would like to know what's going on.
There is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone.
This is the Garden of Doom.
Welcome everyone into Garden of Doom, and this week we are welcoming back our friend J.J. Johnson from Southern Demonology, who's been on the show many times before, multiple times before, and we have yet to just get him on for plain old demonology, and we're going to correct that in the near future. But he's been on, he's talked to us about Shintoism, he's talked to us about the mysterious Bible, the Pseudo-Graphica, I hope I pronounced that even close to correctly this time. We talked about the Ethiopian Bible, those shows were back to back. He speaks multiple languages, including many ancient languages, like Ge'ez, which is ancient Ethiopian. I believe you speak Coptic, read Coptic Egyptian, Old Hebrew, probably Aramaic, who knows, Koine Greek, who knows. I don't know what you don't speak, but you went to Harvard, you got graduate degrees, you do Southern Demonology. Why am I telling everyone about you when you're here and you can tell everyone about yourself?
I'm perfectly fine letting someone else take the reins on that one, but yeah, I went to the Harvard Divinity and mainly studied the Pseudepigrapha and Semitic philology, and even though I got out of that rather than spending the next 12 years of my life getting a PhD program and suffering from already crippling student loan debt, I went into the tech field and have been there for 25 years, but I have still done this on my own and have really focused primarily on translations and looking at connections. And then with Southern Demonology, started in 2017, it has become kind of a, let's talk a little bit about horror films because they're just fun, but let's also look at how the Second Temple period really is kind of flash frozen and preserved and informs a lot of our ideals today, in addition to then looking at some protection mechanisms and really about modern day exorcism,
which is exactly our topic today, which is exorcisms. I'm sure we'll spend some time on modern day exorcisms, but when you say that there's modern day exorcisms, by the way, I'm hoping to get this show edited and ready for publication at or about Halloween, and it's October 27th, so I'm already on a little bit of a turnaround, and I was I botched things up because I announced to the world I was going to put out a Garden of Doom that I'd already recorded, which very well could have been a Garden of Views, with an excellent independent author who's won awards, and our book is called The Room Filler, and it's sort of I definitely want to put it, but it's not Halloweeny, so maybe hopefully I'll get the Exorcism one out by Halloween, and then the Room Filler, maybe I'll put it on just the weekend. So we've got that. I don't have a Garden Views in the books at the moment. I'm also supposed to be doing a show with a rabbi who's also a wrestling promoter to help promote his show, Mitzvah Mania, which is coming up in early November. So we're busy here. But the track that I had lost is that by implication, when you say modern exorcisms, there must be non-modern exorcisms. So to the extent that it's possible, can you take us to sort of like the origins of exorcisms? Where, like, do we know where the first exorcism was, and in what part of the world, etc.?
Well, if we're going by the Christian faith, which at the time was the Jewish faith, really we're talking about the acts that Christ himself performed. I'm sure most people know the story of Legion, where he is cast out into a herd of pigs. That is kind of the origin in terms of Christianity. More also to the fact that Christ himself said that he then gave that same type of authority to his followers.
Well, let's not assume that everyone knows the story of Legion. I think more people know Legion from the X-Men than they know the actual origin story.
Well, here, let me actually, I can pull this up here real quick, and I can read the relevant section here.
While you're doing that, am I correct that before Judaism, Christianity, before there was, what we'll call monotheism, that there weren't really exorcisms? It was more like they were gods that were fighting demons, and demigods that were fighting like bad gods, or and witches and good magic and heroes. It was less of a religious exorcism and more of a Joseph Campbell-esque conflict.
Now, when it comes to Babylon, if you've ever had the chance to read or hear about Professor Finkel or Dr. Finkel's book, The First Ghost, really a phenomenal book. But it really goes through some of the practices that were used by, and I'm going to use the term loosely, Babylonian exorcists. And they really had two different kinds of jobs. Not only were they there to look after the spiritual health of individuals, but they're also there to look after the physical health, because it really kind of boiled down to the same thing. If someone was suffering from horrible migraines, then that could be the result of a ancestor who hasn't received water libations or food donations and had come back to really screw up the place, or it could have been from demons. And Babylonian exorcists, who actually had a very complex training regimen of years, would come in and then do very specified rituals in order to clear out the offending negative entities or spirits that could have been harassing the people involved. It's really absolutely fascinating. And you find a lot of casting away of evil spirits, but not so much of entities taking over a person's will. That really kind of began with Christianity. And I'm not saying that it hasn't existed in other times, other places, but that is by and far the most recognizable and concrete example that I could give.
Yeah, well, we don't have writing, so we can we can imagine that there's probably been forms of casting out that going back however long we want, and or you can take a Graham Hancock approach and assume that they were epochs of higher civilizations. But today we're going to go down more the academic route, and hopefully it's scary enough. Yes, I think it probably is. So okay, I guess I left you off at Legion, and then we'll talk about Christianity a little bit, but I know that we had demons. Well, we're not talking about demons, we're talking about exorcisms, so never mind. Let me get off the Solomon and his ring of 1,000 demons or whatever.
But yeah, here we go. The story of Legion, which is in Mark 5, verses 1 through 20. They went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and in the hills he would cry out and cut himself with stone. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you impure spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send him out of the area. A large herd of pigs was feeding on the nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, "Send us among the pigs, allow us to go into them." He gave them permission, and the impure spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and drowned. And that is from the RSV, or Revised Standard, my favorite version of the translations of the Bible.
All right, typical Dopey Jeff question, but I find it very important. Pigs are not kosher, but I don't know that everyone was kosher then. So were like people able to enjoy the bacon feast after that, or do you not eat demonic pigs whether you're kosher or not?
Actually, there was an episode of the TV show Evil that kind of addressed that. I found it was about a set of pigs that were demonically possessed. It was really kind of interesting. But no, dietary laws were very much in effect, so there was no bacon feasting going on.
So okay, demons or otherwise. So we don't know if there's any demonic pigs. You don't eat them because the dietary rules were in effect. Just the pig was bad enough. Okay, less sexy, but it is what it is. All right, so so the origins of exorcisms as we know them today start with Christian, but and you're the one who I think educated me onto this, though you also suggested I watch Evil, and I did. I watched the first 2 seasons because they're on Netflix. The others are still behind a paywall, so I'll wait for them to come to Netflix to watch the final 2 seasons. But I liked it. It was in the beginning. I felt like, I don't know. It feels like a little bit Chicago PD-ish. It's like NYPD Blue Light, but it's like surprisingly juicy, and sort of snuck up on you that it got juicy. So I too would recommend it. But in some of the episodes, there were clergy from different religions and different denominations doing exorcism, sometimes together. And there's differences, I suppose, but I guess we should start with Christianity, which at the time was, I guess, what we would all call Catholic, even though, there were sects and things, and Gnostics and this, that, and the other thing. But we'll skip over that unless it's material to the topic of exorcisms.
Yeah, it was. At the time, it was only Catholicism, and then, of course, Orthodoxy split off from Catholicism, and then Protestantism came along after Martin Luther. So, yeah, and the subdivisions only continue to grow, because modern day, you even have charismatic Catholic. Catholicism itself can even be subdivided down. So, but that is neither here nor there. In the beginning, exorcisms were kind of pretty simple in nature. Now, Christ, he could just command an evil spirit to leave, and it would. It had no choice, because he was the Son of the Most High, as you heard Legion say. However, when it came to the priests, it's a much more troublesome aspect, because we have to remember that the infernal are so much greater than humanity, and what they want is nothing more than to corrupt, to putrefy, and to debase the human creature, which they view as made in the image of God, specifically of Christ. And that is where the hatred comes from. And actually, a funny thing is you can trace that back to Zoroastrianism. There is a scene in one of the writings that Zarathustra had created, and it describes a realm of light and a realm of darkness. And in the realm of light, you have Ahura Mazda, who is the one true God. And in the realm of darkness, you have Ahriman, who is the devil, essentially. And the devil was slow-witted and did not nearly know anything compared to Ahura Mazda. And he crawled to the edge of the realm of darkness and looked out and saw that there was more, and he wanted it. And then he was stunned by the light from the realm of light and hated it. And there's a lot of banter between the two of them, but Ahura Mazda knew that Ahriman would lose no matter what. But Ahriman, in preparation for war, created the Devas, which are the demons, and then he sent them forth into the world. And then he told the god, I will make your creatures hate you. I will, it sounds almost exactly like it was ripped from a Christian text. That's how accurate it is. And it shows how much Christianity has borrowed heavily from Zoroastrian principles, which were passed down from its influence through Judaism.
Absolutely, and we've explored these subjects many times on the shows, and I've often told people that you don't need to make a choice. If you're a true believer, you can say that was always the universal truth. It just took a while to figure out where the source of the universal truth was coming from. If not, you can just say, hey, these are sort of myths and legends and philosophies and beliefs that either always existed or get recycled from time to time. But I also probably hear some segment of my audience going, wait a minute, there were demons and fallen angels in the book of Enoch, and that all took place, in the early generations, right in the beginning. But remember, we had this man on the show right here to tell us when those books were written. And while no one can be sure of when those stories originated, those books were written AD. They were written in the 1st or 2nd century of AD, after death, Anti-Domini. So while they took place, theoretically, 3,700 years earlier or 4,000 years earlier, whatever, it's like, I don't want to belittle anything, but it's sort of like me writing a book about the Roman Empire, or really more about the pharaohs right now, and it, being adopted. The new beliefs made their way, or the new written beliefs anyway, made their way into the books about the past, and that's why they're canon some places and they're fan fiction in other places.
Yeah, really, they're canon only in one place, which is the Ethiopic Orthodox Church.
And my heart.
And, yep. Oh, trust me, Enoch has a very special place in my heart as well, but I don't take it as canon, though, mainly because it has, as we discussed before, so many theological loopholes that are baked into it. However, yeah, they are, Enoch and Jubilees and other such books, they are categorized as pseudepigrapha, meaning false epitaphs, because they're not written by the people that are claiming to have written them. They're written by people that were just assuming their voice in order to gain more theological credit than what they themselves would have accrued. So, and they were written anywhere from 300 BCE up until 70 CE, essentially.
I would argue they are still being written right now by Freemason temples all over the place, and Zechariah Sitchin. I mean, they're still being written as you know, history in some parts of the world, just changing some of the names and some not at all. But anyway, once again, I have.
Actually,
go ahead, yeah. Oh, yeah, okay, there you go. So, all right. So, listen, I know a bunch of Freemasons, and what I've learned about Freemasons is that they are as varied as everyone else and everything else. And while from the outside you think that they all believe exactly the same thing and they are schooled in the exact same thing, much like Judaism will tell you, we all study from the same Torah, we all have the same interpretations, we all believe the same. No, that's not true either. And it's not the truth with Freemasons. They're definitely influenced by who is the lodge leader, or whatever the Grand Master or whatever, I've spoken to several who very much believe in the Anunnaki origins, which is sort of as far as I'm concerned, a version of Enoch.
Yeah, there are severe differences. Now, most, if not all, Masons should have the first 3 degrees in common, and a lot of the rituals in common, but then you get into the interpretations, and that can vary wildly from Grand Lodge to Grand Lodge. In some states, you have ancient Masons, and then others you have Freemasons, really, in my opinion, to try to justify old racisms that you find especially in the South. Anyway, that's a whole different topic.
Yeah, I probably should also, I'm not sure if I did, because this is audio, but when I do the show, I'm seeing my guest on Zoom. What JJ showed me was his Mason ring, his Freemason ring. So he's speaking from a place of involvement and love or whatever. I don't want to name the emotion more. But all right, let's get back on the exorcism thing, because you know me, I can stray all day and you'll happily dance along because you can talk about pretty much anything. So let keep me on track. Keep me on the path of exorcisms.
Sure. So let me get back to where I was when we were previously.
We talked about Legion. I got you sidetracked on the pigs and kosher thing, and then you're saying that basically, it was imported by Zoroastrianism, but that basically our concepts of exorcism as we know them now started with Christianity.
Yeah, and really, you can trace a lot of the basics down to that story of Legion, because it shows an individual who has lost their will. It has been dominated by the enemy. They have some extraordinary physical capabilities to them. They are not able to be bound or controlled. And the name aspect has come up within that story as well, and that really kind of cements a lot of the kind of basics that we know today within modern exorcism. Now, I had the pleasure of getting to be very good friends, who I met through the show, an exorcist that lives in Georgia named Father Michael Birdsong. And we have collaborated a great deal. And in fact, he began teaching a course for those who want to get involved as an assistant in exorcisms called The Nature of the Demonic. And I've been teaching this with him, and we're actually in the process of finishing up a book which will have everything that we talked about for future classes and for those who are interested. But yeah, the basics of, let's actually break down the steps, at least how we think of them now, in terms of how a person becomes influenced by the demon. I think that's a good place to start.
I agree.
So, roughly speaking, and you really can't like classify things absolutely precise, but I like to think of it in 3 different steps. You have obsession, oppression, possession, and then there's a very special edge case in possession, which you can refer to as perfect possession. Anyway, obsession. It is something that is, and it's not that you're just thinking about doing bad things, or you're thinking about some evil entity as if you were obsessing about something. It can be that, but it really is coming from the Latin phrase of obscure. But what obsession is that it is a mental process. It is the enemy who is attempting to influence your life, and it's just kind of probing at the edges of your consciousness. It's trying to wreak havoc in your life and to finally with the goal of taking over. The next step is oppression, and this is when things move from the only mental into the physical phase. And it could mean that you have given up authority of your home, which is a safe space. It could result in a lot of different things, but the entity then is able to not only harass you mentally, but also physically. You could get strange bruises. In extreme cases, you could get scratches that can actually show kind of like words or writings, etc. And then after it has found a way in, it then leads to possession. And let me be clear. People have an innate defense against any intrusion, and that is called free will. However, the infernal are masters at mitigating that defense, and they do so by either making the person believe that their free will does not exist, or by giving it up, by minimizing. And through that crack in the armor, they can slither in. And when they do, they can actually take over your body. People that have been possessed can report severe memory loss, often for months or even years at a time. If you want to read some harrowing stories about this, I cannot recommend enough Father Malachi Martin's Hostage to the Devil, which has the subtitle of The Possession and Exorcism of 5 Contemporary Americans. Not only does he go through, and it's actually with the new version that's 6, because there's one in the prelude and the conclusion. But he then goes into the theological aspects in the appendices, and they are amazing. Now, Martin himself is a little bit of a controversial figure, but you cannot discount how important this book is. In fact, I can honestly say that it fundamentally kind of changed the direction. It helped to shape the direction of my life when I first read it as part of a class assignment in college. And yeah, I was hooked on the topic.
Wow. And so much so that you've become a exorcist, I guess, apprentice and collaborating on a book, and we can probably circle back to that a little bit later. So somewhere in the story of Legion, Jesus obtained the name of the demon, and in media, whether it's The Exorcist or the show Evil or the possession of, or the exorcism of Emily Rose. I forget the actual name of the movie, but whatever. There's always, what is your name? What is your name? Was that just adopted because in the tale between Jesus and Legion, he got the name? And are we sure that you actually need the name of the demon to get power over it? Or is that just the point to say, show Jesus' power, that my name is Legion because we are many, and Jesus is like, don't worry, no problem. I can take 2,000 demons by myself and put them into pigs. And they're like, thank you for your mercy. Was it more about that, or is there actually, is that you need the name? I'm going somewhere with this somewhere, and I've actually talked about it in other shows, but do you need the name to do a proper exorcism, or is that just sort of I'm going to say corruption, that's too strong a word, but a corruption of the interpretation of that story? Bless you.
Thank you. You actually, so you need the demon to identify itself.
Okay.
Now, whether it is a proper name or it is a moniker that it gives itself, it doesn't really matter, but you need to find out about it. However, I will say that this point is horribly confused. If you've ever had the displeasure of watching the movie Name the Demon on Tubi, it actually depicts these priests that are supposedly experts in exorcism that apparently have never ever dealt with a demon because of their acting. They actually bring a dictionary of demonology with them, and as they're going through the exorcism, they're looking at clues and they're trying to make the demon talk to find out who it might actually be. And it's not like that whatsoever.
So it's like a game show. They're trying to use King James's demonology book, and
exactly. And oh gosh, I was just like, you have no idea what you're doing, do you? Now, the point is that this is essentially it's a spiritual battle between the priest and the possessed. And the priest is actually doing something, I like to call it a loving act of sacrifice. The priest is essentially setting himself up as a substitute for the possessed person. And that then, Martin described it as the clash. This a period in which the priest's will is coming up directly against the demonic will. And this is the part where the name is very, very important, because if you're able to get the thing to identify itself in some fashion, then you have gained the upper hand. And one of the most important aspects that is part of any exorcism is that you never, ever listen to the demonic. they will do everything that they can to distract, to throw you off the path, or to elicit extremely strong emotions, or to, because the demonic, they can know things that they should not be able to know, and they can sit there and start digging into your past and try to come up with ways to get you to leave. They'll do anything, and you have to essentially ignore that, and especially never ask questions to the demonic, because you can't ever trust what one of these things says, but B, you really open yourself up on multiple different attack surfaces if you go down that very perilous road.
Well, so if they give you a name, how do you know they're telling the truth? I mean, I would assume that they try to give you the wrong name, so how do you know when you're... I mean, I'm going to make a metaphor here because I can't think of a better one. I mean, I'm assuming you need the name because it's sort of like Muhammad Ali is the boxer, and he's going to have a different strategy with George Foreman than he is with Joe Frazier. And for those of you who are too young to know what I'm talking about, I don't know. Let's assume that you're an MMA fighter. You're going to have a different strategy if you're fighting a 150-pound guy versus a 220-pound guy. Or I don't know. But is it about matchups that you need it, or am I just trying to apply concepts that don't relate to one another?
Yeah, it's not about matchups. It's not about changing strategy around what may be going on.
Okay.
It's more about just getting the demon to a place where it's begun to recognize the authority of Christ.
Okay, so once it starts telling the truth, you know you've got it on the slippery slope, basically.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because the exorcist, and that's the most important thing, it's never in... anything is never done in the exorcist name. It's not done by the exorcist power or authority or will. Everything is being done through Christ, through God. And horrible things happen when an exorcist steps out from that protection and tries to do anything in their own name.
Okay, makes perfect sense. All right, so now I understand the power of the name isn't, without divining a strategy. It's just that once you've gotten the true name, and I guess you just sort of know it when you're a trained exorcist, that you know that you've got the demon on the ropes because you've gotten truth out of them, which means that you have the upper hand. Okay, all right. So I don't know where to go with this, if what the rest of the process is, or if this is a good time to pivot and what are some of the what's the anatomy of an exorcist in, I guess we should probably start with standard Catholic, if there is such a thing, and then maybe take us through other religions and their exorcisms, because I imagine they modeled themselves after Catholicism, but probably have their own unique stamps upon it.
Yeah, I'm not great when it comes to other particular religions and how they handle this. If we're talking about the theological concept, let's say the differences in between Christianity and, say, Islam, I know some of that, but
sure.
Beyond that, I was thinking about this. Let's take a quick step back and go through how Hollywood depicts exorcism.
Sure.
As you can probably imagine, Hollywood gets it wrong 99% of the time. And one of the things that first comes out is that Hollywood typically depicts an exorcism as taking place over the span of an hour or a day. And that simply is not true. In fact, an exorcism often is not a one and done type of affair. In fact, one of the most prominent cases that we know of those in which actually inspired the book behind The Exorcist, and then later the movie, that took week upon weeks in order to complete. So that is number one completely out the window. And the old joke of I need an old priest and a new priest, that too is absolutely not correct. It is more about, I mean, an exorcist would normally have an assistant or two or three. It really depends upon the case. But an exorcist loves to have assistants, especially when it comes to having a medical professional in the room to make sure that the person is doing okay, they're not being completely stressed out, etc.
So they want a doctor.
Exactly. And in fact, going to the prerequisites, and this is true for the Catholic Church especially, a person has to have both physical and mental evaluation in order to ensure that there is not a more common reason that could explain a person's erratic behavior.
Right.
Because as Father Birdsong is famous for saying, you can't cast out mental illness. And you don't want to put someone through an intensive process like exorcism for no reason whatsoever, or to just put a band-aid on a situation and just hope that it's going to work. You really want to make sure that there is an infiltration of the enemy that is currently going on. And this is not a checkbox like some movies like to pretend, oh, I need this form filled out so I can get an exorcism. It's not like that. An exorcism is a very serious process that relies upon the authority of the church in order to conduct. And as such, the hierarchy of the priesthood is involved. It has to be, depending upon where you are in the Catholic geography, it requires at least a bishop's approval in order for an exorcism to take place. And even in most dioceses, need at least one exorcist on staff. They're very rare, and they don't publicize their names. We don't quite know who it is for a particular diocese. But, yeah, and so if you don't have that authority, then there's no way that you should be conducting an exorcism, period, especially in the Catholic faith.
What's the difference between like a priest, a Monsignor, a bishop, and a cardinal? And are there other ranks that are, sort of important, I guess, in what I'm going to call a military structure?
That's kind of what it is. I mean, under the Pope, you have cardinals, and then under that, you have bishops. And each one of those levels they are responsible for different levels of the hierarchy of the church. And I am not an expert in that or in like Holy See doctrine by any stretch of the imagination. So I could get this completely wrong, but typically, a priest is over a church, or it could be a couple of priests that's over a particular church. Bishops are typically over a diocese, so they'll have multiple churches underneath them. And then cardinals are usually, they are there for an entire geographic region.
Okay. And Monsignor, what does that mean?
No idea.
Gotcha. Okay, me either. And I'm asking you because these different characters have different titles in the show Evil, and I'm not always clear as to what the ranks are, but Monsignor was the one I was most confused about, and you don't know, so I don't know, so let's move on.
Yeah, in fact, let's just go back to Evil. So Evil is a great show. It really, it's vastly different between seasons. Like season 1 was really about trying to determine if the main character, Christine, is really being affected by the demonic or not. And it was really kind of an open question as to whether evil really exists or if it's just kind of a figment in her head. And then that question is pretty much put to bed after season 1, and 2 through 4 is really more about individual stories in which this team of researchers is going to investigate. Nothing about evil is more accurate ever. It's just great stories, and I mean it's really fun in that regard. But you should never try to extract actual lore from this particular show, and it's kind of a danger to do that to any show about exorcism. In fact, the one that I like the most, and it's a movie, and it's called Nefarious. Absolutely phenomenal. You can actually watch it for free on YouTube now, but it is really kind of a two-man play. It is a prisoner and a psychiatrist, and it's not a perfect movie, but it really kind of, not only does it kind of lay out more, I would say, of a Milton-esque theology around why the demonic hates humanity and would do anything they can to corrupt us in order to deny us God's favor and love. But there's no overt, I'm going to say, gross displays of power.
Okay.
There's only one scene, in fact, where a light bulb shattered, and the thing that it's claiming to possess this prisoner is, did I do that? Did it happen naturally? You'll never know. And that is exactly, kind of what's going on here. Rarely you're going to walk into a situation which a person's head is spinning around and they're vomiting pea soup all over the place. It would be great if there were such very clear signals that a person is possessed. And that's why going through mental and physical evaluations are so important to ensure that you're not dealing with something else.
Understood. Or I think, anyway. Okay. So it's a prolonged battle. It sounds like, almost like inpatient rehab where it's going for a while, but then there's, sort of follow-ups and things that you need to do over a long period of time. And again, I'm sure that's a extremely imperfect analogy, but
it's pretty, actually, it's pretty accurate.
Oh, good for me.
Especially when you're dealing, so there are two types of exorcism. There's exorcism of place or locale, and then there's exorcism of person. And we've been talking about person this entire time,
right?
But of place and locale is of equal importance. Now, and that one doesn't require such rigorous authority in order to be granted. I've known priests who've been able to, just based on their own judgment, can go out and do an exorcism of place just based upon if they feel that it is necessary. So there's a lot of leeway when it comes to that particular one.
Sure, there's no human being that you're gonna put them, you're relegating them to like a year of pain and torment when it's a place. And then, actually this sounds a lot like hauntings. There's hauntings of people and there's hauntings of places, generally in ghost stories. Again, just like a little parallel there. But so a lot more individual independent discretion at the priest level for a place. Now, when you are doing an exorcism of a place, is it the same sort of prolonged process, or can it be like a day cleansing?
Oh, it can go for, I mean, those are not nearly as long in duration. Typically, it's like an hour and a half session. And so the basis of both types of exorcism are really laid forth in the Roman Ritual, which is a book. However, it is not an exact science. The ritual does not have just something that is it's written out and you just follow it and you're good to go. It is more of a template, a blueprint as to what a priest should do. And then, because if you read the ritual just straight, you're going to be done in like 30, 45 minutes, and you got nothing left. It's meant to be augmented with calls to action and supplemental prayers and all the rest of it. So there's a lot to it. But yeah, a priest will go out, they will perform the exorcism of place, and rarely is once enough. They'll do it, and then they will keep following up with the people that live there or are affected by it and say, what's going on? Is there any reoccurrences? And if so, then they'll go back and they will do it again. And that typically involves both blessing the house with certain types of exorcised oil around all entranceways, but it's also then using holy water and saying the right prayers over the place, and eventually it will be tamped down. In fact, if you want a really good example of this, this past season, because it just finished a little bit ago, in season 5, I presented the first case files, and it was Father Birdsong and his son Deacon Josh who went out to cleanse a home that was suffering from a generational curse, and it's required 3 or 4 exorcisms of place in order to get the influence to be mitigated.
What are the telltale signs that a place, a structure, a geography is possessed?
There's a few things. First, if the people that are there are being highly disturbed, if you're sensing cold spots in certain areas, if the shadows are darkening rooms in times in which they should not be, there's an entire laundry list of items that will point to, well, something's just not right here. But in the most extreme cases, you will have people that are being severely negatively affected. They could be having horrendous health issues. Their will could be mitigated. In fact, in rare cases, you'll find people that are suffering from kennel syndrome, where they're just kind of staring vacantly into the ether. Or they begin, and this is the kennel syndrome, where they just start walking in circles and they can't stop. Those are clear signs that you're not dealing with just a haunted property, but with something much more insidious.
Does it have to be a structure or building, or can it be like an area of the forest, a soccer field?
Yeah, it does not have to be like a residence or a house. It can be the land itself that has gained a horrendous attachment, and that's normally through some very evil acts that have been done around that place, which has then which essentially it has opened up a doorway of invitation to the infernal, and they'll gladly take it.
I think we touched on it earlier, but I don't know that we actually said it expressly. What are the telltale signs? What's the difference between someone who's severely mentally ill and how you can tell that someone is demonic? I mean, do you really hear different voices, tones, speaking in languages that they couldn't possibly know or they don't know? Is it more than self-harm and acting crazy, for lack of a better term? I mean, how does the church or the decision maker vet? I understand. I heard that there's a team of experts, psychiatrists, etc. there. But how do they determine someone's like a severe schizophrenic, or just someone that's looking for attention, or otherwise, PTSD, drugs, whatever the case might be, diminished capacity, versus possessed? What are we looking for? What are the distinguishing factors?
So it really kind of boils down to is something that cannot be explained. Does that person suddenly have insight into secret knowledge which there is no way in heck they would be able to possess themselves? Whether that be languages, whether that be physical strength, whether that be the darkening of rooms. The list goes on and on, but essentially it's classified as secret knowledge. And that is a real telltale sign that a person is being severely affected.
Now, you mentioned earlier that you couldn't really compare and contrast different types of exorcisms and different types of religions. Are there significant differences between like a Roman Catholic exorcist and I'll just say a Protestant exorcist versus Southern Baptist? Is there like intra-Christianity? Are there substantial differences, or are they more like, we don't say the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. We just say our Lord Jesus Christ. Or is it just minor stuff like that?
No, it's severe differences. It really depends on the type of Protestant church that you're particularly dealing with, but it could be as simple as the preacher getting up in front of the congregation and calling forth what they think is the afflicted, and trying to cast a thing out then and there. Or it could be a private session in which they're doing this. It could, but essentially, it's just the preacher who makes that determination. And sometimes they may have an assistant or two, but it's much more loosey-goosey, and they most definitely do not have the structure needed in order to perform. I'm not saying that it can't happen. I'm not looking to offend anybody, because I grew up Southern Baptist and then converted to Catholicism. So, but yeah, they are vastly different. You don't really find that true structure and gravitas to an exorcism until you get to the more ritualistic based versions of Christianity, whether that be Orthodoxy or Catholicism. Okay. That's why you kind of find a common meme of, oh, you're dealing with demons? Go to the Catholics.
Okay. So even if you're not Catholic, you may call upon the Catholic Church to help you in the case of an exorcism, and the Catholic Church is like, demon is a demon, God is God, we're there.
Yep, exactly.
I mean, once they vet it. Okay. You did say that you knew something about the difference within Islam, so I'll take what I can get. What are some of the differences there?
Yeah, so it's so that would, these rites would be performed by imam, and an imam is Islamic priest. However, you're not. So it's a lot. It's a little bit more complicated because in Christianity, the demonic are just pure evil, and they are out to only cause harm. However, when it comes to Islam, you're dealing with jinn, and jinn, although they're an entirely separate race, and they can be good or evil, and so you have a lot more variations that you're dealing with, but they are absolutely no less terrifying when they are out to cause harm. If you ever want to see some good movies on that front, Dabe is a great set of movies in addition to Under the Shadow, which is absolutely phenomenal.
What was the first one? Dabe or Dave?
Dabe, Dabbe.
Okay.
I think you can find that on Netflix, but the first two, and there's an entire series of them. The first two especially are really, really good.
Okay, so that sounds interesting. Yeah, I knew that the jinn were different than angels and demons. I knew that the jinn, like, they're made of fire, and they can be good, they can be evil, they can be convinced to be, out of what their original intentions were. They have like some amount of free will. They can even change sides. They can change their minds. And they're not terribly unlike some other, mythological creatures in lots of mythologies. But is it only jinn who do the possessions in Islam? Or, because I know that they have well, I don't know. I think they have demons as well as angels. Or is it just angels and jinn?
It's just angels and jinn.
Okay, so there are no actual demons. The closest thing to a demon is a jinn, which can change its mind, which, I guess the goal of, I guess once there's a fully Islamic world, all the jinn will also see the light with all the humans. Is that sort of how the theory goes? Or the jinn, we don't really care. They're a different species all together.
They are different, but typically there are different clans of jinn, and some clans are good or neutral, but then the other ones are just absolutely wretched.
It's like Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, and if you're in one of the wretched categories, then it's not going to change. You're not going to suddenly switch sides. It's just you're hateful and evil, and that's the way you're going to be. So.
Okay, so if you're in the League of Evil Mutants or the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, you're all the way committed to it. You're not like Magneto, where sometimes you become good.
Exactly.
Okay.
Even Satan himself is a jinn in Islam.
Okay. Did not know that. All right. Well, that interesting stuff. I know you said you didn't, but is there anything about Jewish exorcisms that you know, or should we just pass on that?
Yeah, I am not an expert on that front, so I would have to pass on that one.
Yeah, well, maybe that'll give you some fodder for Southern Demonology, and then
absolutely it will. I've been wanting to, because I've ran across one individual who has claimed to have been possessed by a Dybbuk, and that was a wild story. It's the series of episodes by the demon folklorist. It was a really interesting story.
I used to know what a Dybbuk is. I forgot what a Dybbuk is. I think they're somehow tied to a certain type of box. Maybe I'm mixing up.
That's how we know them now, Dybbuk boxes. But a Dybbuk is a negative entity, which... Yeah, in Jewish lore, there's a lot of different Jewish lore about Dybbuks, but there's a good bit.
Are they closer to jinn than demons? Are they?
Yeah, they're more like jinn, I would say, because they're not necessarily the most evil things in the world. But I don't think you're going to have a good time if you ever ran into one. I'll put it that way.
Is it sort of like the older the religion, the closer it is to, like, sort of like your Greek mythology, where there's like a million different creatures and with all, sometimes confusing and contradicting traits?
Not really. When you're dealing with negative entities, the older the religion, usually the much more simplified it, and it only then becomes refined and elaborated upon as it continues to grow older and older. That's definitely the truth for Judaism, where things were, it was only God, and then outside forces brought in the enemy, and then through the Talmud and various midrashes, that was then further defined and defined again until you get something much more elaborate. And of course, the older religion it begins to incorporate local myths and legends, and so they then too suddenly, are entered into the fold.
Is there anything to it that somebody is possessed, like they may actually take different physical traits, like they get vampire teeth, they get talon-like fingers and feet, they get goat eyes or cat eyes or snake eyes, or glowing eyes at some point, smell like brimstone? Nothing?
That is pure Hollywood special effects going on. It's more now. The only thing that, especially Father Martin reported in his book, is that their facial features can become distorted. It's almost like the demonic has put their thumb on a person's face and then has rearranged it slightly.
From the inside or from the outside?
From the outside. So it's not like suddenly they get pronounced features and they start turning into various animals. It's nothing like that. It's just more like you start looking at their face and it just seems wrong.
Okay, so it's not like they turn from Gary Oldman's face into like sort of a bat face, like in Dracula.
No, not whatsoever. No, nothing like that.
It's more like they're sort of like their shape is their face becomes like a pillow, and you can sort of push it around, and it accentuates in some places and gets narrower in others.
Yeah, exactly. It's nothing like that.
Like the old movie Altered States, maybe something a little bit like that. Funhouse Mirror kind of thing.
And actually, if you don't mind, I'd like to end on something that's more personal to me.
I don't mind at all.
You never know the true extent of obsession and oppression. And, if you, for example, I am a person who has suffered from horrendous night terrors for my entire life.
Wow.
I remember my first one when I was 3, and it has continued throughout the rest of my life. That is until I began wearing 2 different exorcise medals of Saint Benedict around my neck. And that was done around 5 months ago. And I have not had a single nightmare. And I have never gone my entire life without this. And my dreams were not just regular dreams. In fact, I had 3 that actually caused me physical pain, and they were about the demonic. And that kind of led me down this path of what in the world might be going on. Because I can say this for sure, running a podcast that is talking about the enemy it's not the safest of activities. You draw the ire, and I have caught EVPs on my own podcast, which are just frightening.
EVP stands for?
Electronic voice phenomenon.
Okay.
Things that you don't notice while it's going on, but after recording and then amplifying the sound, you notice weird stuff going on.
So you listen back to your own recording, you hear it back like, Hic sunt dracones.
Yeah, I've heard everything. I've only captured, two different sets. One only had like 2 sounds in it, and then another episode had like 4. But one of them actually was like a demonic grunting that was going on, and I ruled out every other case as to what could have been causing it, and there's nothing that I could come up with. And I'm not saying that's what it is, but I sure couldn't find an underlying cause for it.
Listen, I know I saw scoffed at it way back when I had Leo Zagami on the show about how he thought that Satan was in the tech world, but there are definitely ghosts in these machines or something. They're definitely a vehicle for something. I don't know what it is, but I believe the night terrors and the Saint Benedict exercise medallions and or pendants and how it worked for you. I believe that's what they call in the industry a calling, sir.
Yeah, actually, when I was in Harvard, I actually was intending to go into the Jesuit priesthood, and I took spiritual direction from the Jesuits, and it was absolutely amazing. Now, my life took me in a radically different way, and I didn't wind up going that path, and I know that my wife and kids are very happy for that fact.
Well, sure.
Or at least my wife is usually happy with that fact. But yeah, no, it's something that I am exploring a good bit more now. I would tell you that.
Excellent. All right. Is there anything that I should have asked you about, or that we should have talked about and covered that we did not?
The only thing that I will add in here is that being an exorcist it's not something that one does lightly. And I think Father Martin says it best when he describes the effects that doing an exorcism can have on a priest. It can often rob you of your joy of life, because an exorcist is going to lose something from the process. Some bit of himself is not going to be there anymore after performing an exorcism. So it's never something to enter into lightly. And unfortunately, there are these unscrupulous people out there that will offer essentially like a weekend certificate, and now you're an expert in casting out demons, and it doesn't work like that. It takes years.
Those are false prophets.
Exactly.
Let me ask you this. You just begged the question. I was gonna let you leave it at that. But has there ever been a case where a priest has been so prolific or did so many exorcists, let's just say successfully, and lost so much of it's a priest, so himself, that then he became vulnerable to being possessed himself?
There is one of the stories.
That'd be a cool movie, by the way.
It would be, but there is a story in Hostage to the Devil in which it's not exactly the same. But there is a priest who becomes possessed. And it's because... So, Father Martin did not like postmodernism. And I happen to study postmodernism quite extensively. So, that was a little bit, when I was first reading this book, scared the crap out of me. But there's a priest who becomes exposed to some dangerous ideals and then becomes possessed. And yet they were still leading services. It wasn't Catholic anymore, but they kind of branched out and became their own independent thing. But the priest would never use proper words anymore for things. They couldn't say God. They would substitute light. It was all of these substitutions. But eventually, that led to his exorcism, and it's a harrowing story.
But is it a true story or is it fiction?
Oh, it's true. All of these stories in this book are true.
I mean, we sort of got it fictionalized a little bit in the show Midnight Mass. I mean, it was a vampire, not exactly a demon, but same thing. They're all stand-ins with the same thing more or less.
Pretty much. But no, but there's never essentially if and it doesn't take a whole lot of exorcism. It really depends upon the priest. There's some quality that will allow a priest to do either just 1 or 2 exorcisms, and sometimes they can do hundreds. Who knows why? But when you're robbed of that spark of joy of life, then you're just simply existing, and there's nothing that can really be done to bring you back. And it's that's why I say it's an act of loving sacrifice, because you're never going to be the same afterwards.
Yeah, I was going to ask other things, but I think that they're probably unnecessary. All right, there is definitely a question I have that is unnecessary, but I like doing it anyway. And so I asked the guest, is there any song that you would associate with the topic and what we talked about today that can or should be the outro? I was going to do something trite like "In Excess is the Devil Inside," but maybe use something like "Deeper" or something that could be used.
I have never ever thought about that, honestly. That would be a good choice for a song, but I don't have a particular song, but I do have a psalm.
Okay.
Psalm.
Absolutely.
And that would be Psalm 91. And it is absolutely beautiful. I think, as I have shared previously, there is no direct mention of demons in the Hebrew Bible, but especially in the latter words, there's a ton of allusions to them. And Psalm 91 is the ultimate protection psalm, and it's just absolutely beautiful.
Okay, so everyone check out Psalm 91, but you're probably going to hear the "In Excess is the Devil Inside" after JJ tells you where he can be found and followed, because I'm pretty sure he wants to be found and followed.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can find Southern Demonology, my contact information, and all of my social links on the website, which is southerndemonology.com. But actually, I just got through completely redoing, so now you can listen to all episodes, read the information, and I will soon be adding transcripts to that list as well. So.
Excellent. And if somehow you are listening to this show for the first time, maybe you're a fan of JJ's and you decided to check this out, you didn't want to check out the other 3 or 4 shows he's been on, or somehow you found this by accident, if you subscribe to Garden of Doom, I would love that. You get Garden of Doom, which is shows like this and a crazy wide variety. You get Garden Views, which is also a lot of variety, but is more legal, business, tech, science, pop culture, entertainment law, space law, things like that. And then you also get, it's sort of a limited series. We'll see how long it goes or how many seasons it has or iterations. But GOD presents the Book of Black, which is me with my co-host, or I'm the co-host, PJ Black, who's a professional wrestler. You might know him as, or remember him as Justin Gabriel from his days in WWE. And we talk about Garden of Doom things with people who are in and around wrestling. Yeah, you get 3 shows for 1 for the price of nothing. And hopefully you will. Thank you once again, JJ Johnson. We're going to obviously book you for plain old demonology, which is, probably not even the right phrase to use. At some point, get you into your happy place or your expertise place. And everyone, check out Southern Demonology and check me out and appreciate it. And you'll hear from us later on in the week.
Words, weapons, sharpened knives, makes you wonder how the other half died. Other half died. Makes me wonder, wonder. Well, here come the man with a look in his eye. He's fed on nothing but full of pride. Look at him go, look at him kick. Makes you wonder how the other half lives. Every single one of us, the devil inside, devil inside, devil inside. Every single one of us, the devil inside. Oh. Here come the world, the look in its eye. Future uncertain, but certainly slight. Look at the faces, listen to the bells. It's hard to believe we need a place called hell. Place called hell. The devil inside, the devil inside. Every single one of us, the devil inside, devil inside, the devil inside. Every single one of us, the devil inside. Ooh. Na, 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 na. Well, here comes a woman with a look in her eye. She's raised on a level with flesh on the mind. Words are weapons, sharpen the knives. Makes you wonder how the other half died. The devil inside, the devil inside. Every single